You can apply for an extension while you're in the United States and see if that extension will get approved. Extensions on B1, B2 are not really looked favorably upon.
What is visa officer trying to assess for B1, B2?
And I've seen millionaires get rejected, and the reason is they did not explain their finances well enough.
What are some of the common mistakes or red flags that you see for B1, B2 for rejection? Like, okay, do you have any relatives or people who you know? One, should they say yes or should they say no? And two, if it is a relative who is on F1 or H1B or green card, like how does this all affect? What about prior F1 denial, H1B denial? Can that affect B1, B2? Before we dive into all the strategies and stories that we're going to discuss in this podcast, let me ask you this. Do you have a clear job hunting strategy to get an internship or a full-time job? Most people don't, and it's costing them opportunities. I've helped over 1100 students with their strategies through my ultimate job hunting course.
And trust me, I'm not even kidding. I could see so many recruiters viewing my profile.
And it's been the best investment I've ever made.
The content is incredibly practical, filled with tips and strategies that make you stand out to recruiters.
It was one of the best courses that I have done till date.
This course covers everything that you need to stand out. You will get ultimate resume course, you will get ultimate LinkedIn course, networking strategy, access to 1100 plus job seekers for support, and personal support from me through WhatsApp group. I will walk you through every single step that you need with real examples and the tools that will give you an edge. I don't want you to miss any other opportunity to land your next job or an internship. So check the link in the description. And now I will let you enjoy the podcast. Okay, here we go. Round 5, 6, 7. I don't know. But I'm excited to do a different than F1 visa because you also did B1, B2, L1s and H1B. And I know all of these videos are coming, but for people who might have not watched our previous video, maybe we can do a quick intro.
Thanks so much for having me, Yudi. My name is Yvette Bunsel. I'm a former U.S. consular officer. I worked in India from 2018 to 2022, and then I started Udeti, which is a visa interview preparation company. I now reside in the U.S., and I actually came to the U.S. at the age of 9 years old, so I'm an immigrant myself, and I want to bring some transparency and help guide visa applicants so that they can travel, achieve their dreams in the United States.
Nice. And you did do like a lot of these B1s and H1s and L1s and all of these. So you have seen people standing in the line, nervously waiting for their chance. And then, you obviously know what kind of things you were expecting as an officer and your like hopefully colleagues as well. And then what kind of answers you are getting. So hopefully in this video, we can provide them like everything they need to know if they are applying for B1, B2 visa. So I just want to start like, what the heck is B1 and B2? Is this two separate things? Because I've seen when people get STEM, it usually says B1/B2. So like, is there a difference, and what is the difference?
So technically a B1 visa is for business travel, conferences, and short-term stays for training in the United States. A B2 visa is for tourism, to visit Miami, any sort of tourism activities is a B2 visa, but they're generally given together. So the visa foil will always say most of the time B1, B2 visa. It's a 10-year validity visa in India, but other countries it's 5 years, and it depends on the country. And the maximum length of stay on a B1, B2 visa in the United States is 6 months. However, your actual stay in the United States should be in line with permitted B1, B2 activities, what you're telling the consular officer, and what you're actually doing in the United States.
Can we increase the stay? Like if let's say my mom is coming next year and we got pregnant and now I want her to stay. Not that we are, but if that happens, can I say like I want my mom to stay extra and like can I extend it? Do you know?
You can apply for an extension while you're in the United States and see if that extension will get
goes through.
approved.
Hmm.
However, there's no guarantee that it would ever get approved. Secondly, when your mom goes to renew her visa, extensions on B1, B2 are not really looked favorably upon.
Hmm.
So I would recommend, unless it's an emergency or in the hospital, you can't leave the United States to leave before the 6 month. Otherwise, you may jeopardize your opportunity for a B1, B2 in the future.
Got it. Okay, nice. So I'm gonna present both the cases, but B1 for business conferences, etc. B2 family visits, tourism, etc. So majority of my audience is parents who are wanting to come for their graduation, meet their kids, etc. Should when they're filling that DS 160, should they say B2 or should they do B1, B2?
It doesn't matter. The visa foil will say B1, B2, regardless of whether you put B1 or B2 when you're filling out that DS 160.
Okay, cool. And again, we'll break through this multiple times, but what is visa officer trying to assess for B1, B2? Is it home ties? Is it this person is like immigration intent? Like what exactly are you guys? Because for F1 visa, it's separate, H1 visa is separate, but what is for B1, B2?
They are trying to determine if the applicant will use the visa appropriately.
Mm.
So if I give this person a visa, will they use it in compliance with B1 or B2 rules and regulation? So they use ties and finances and their purpose of travel to ascertain whether or not that individual will use that visa appropriately.
What you're gonna watch is an amazing story, but before you watch that, I just want to quickly say that all of these story, I compile the key insights from these stories and all the podcasts that I do, and I put this in my free exclusive newsletter community. Every week, more than 16,000 people receive my newsletter, and they love it. And here are some of the examples you can see. This was a podcast on George Mason universities, and you can see how to network and 10% cold emailing, powerful LinkedIn techniques, and so on and so forth. So if you're interested in becoming part of this exclusive newsletter community, absolutely free. Link is in the description, or you can go to udj.com/newsletter. It does. What are the, like, how do you do that then? Like, what are the typical questions you would ask to understand, like, that they are going to use it the way it is intended to be used?
So, in order for you to travel to the United States, you have to have a certain level of finances. So, financing your job, what you do, is something they're going to ask, or who's going to sponsor your education, say your family member in the United States. So, by establishing that you can afford to travel to the United States, they don't have to necessarily worry about you becoming an Uber driver or working illegally while on the B1, B2 visa. So, asking those financial questions.
Mm.
Ties. So everybody hears the word ties. That means what do they have in their home country? So the consular officer is trying to assess, do they have enough in their home country to use their visa wisely in the United States and then return back? That could be parents or siblings or a spouse or a child. It could be how much education you have, because say you got a master's degree or PhD in your home country. Are you really going to risk doing illegal activities in the United States, or not returning back to your home country because your prospects in the United States is you cannot get a professional job unless you convert to a legal status at some point, right? So education can be considered a tie.
Mm.
So that's how they assess ties. And then purpose of travel, like, does the purpose of travel align with this person's profile? Does it make sense for them that they're going to be doing this thing? And that, in a sense, starts to paint a picture of whether or not this person can afford to go and if they'll use their visa appropriately or not, or if they have immigrant intent or not, by sussing out some of those three primary criterias.
Mm. Is there like a counter given to you guys at all that you have to only accept this many visas and then just reject randomly? I don't know. Like, is there a quota? Because I feel like and again, I'm generalizing this here, but uh, it sounds so straightforward that I'm going for my kid's graduation. Like, why would they reject a visa? Or I'm going to go to New York, and because I always wanted to go to New York, but possibly they are not prepared the interviews the way they are. Is there like common rejections, and then do you get like quotas that okay, we only supposed to approve this many, we have already approved it, now we can't approve more?
No, the vice consul, the visa officer, has full discretion over whether they approve or deny a visa, and there's no approval or denial quota
Mm.
at all. So if they see many people that day that are qualified and the story is lining up and the finances are solid, that officer can approve those
Mm.
visas. So
Okay. Yeah. And so another, like I'll tell you some myths that I have come across, and then you tell me if it's like true or not. Having visa in other countries like Canada, um, how is it good? Is it bad? Like, how does it affect your B1, B2?
it's generally good to have prior travel because it establishes a pattern that you're going on vacation, for example. So if
Mm.
you want to go on vacation in the United States and you've already been on vacation in Europe and Canada, it shows two things that, this is in alignment with what you usually do as a person. And then you were able to afford those big trips and return home. So you're most likely able to afford a trip in the United States because remember, visa officers don't have your tax records. They don't have a crystal ball that tells them exactly how much you make. They have to rely on the DS-160 reported income and what you tell them that you make. And
Mm.
I've seen millionaires get rejected, and the reason is they did not explain their finances well enough. So, back to your question, the prior travel really establishes that you can afford to travel. Now, I've also seen applicants try to do weird things on their DS-160, like put all the transit countries that they went to. And for one client that I saw, I'm like, what were you doing in Rwanda? Like, what were you doing in Ghana? Like, they're like, we transited there. I'm like, this is a red flag. I hope you know, like, you're looking like a trafficker with these transit countries on your DS-160
Mm.
because they're taking that prior travel to the next level. So just be aware that just
Yeah, so
don't do
if I'm laying over at London airport does not mean I travel to London. It's just you're in airport and waiting for your next flight to connect. Mm. Got
Yeah,
it.
and also consular officers will ask you about what you did in London or what you did in Italy. So if you're lying,
Waiting for my next flight.
yeah,
How would you react to that if I told you that?
I mean that's better than like some other countries where you have no business being at. So
True, true. Yeah. What are some of the common mistakes or red flags that you see for B1, B2 for rejection? Like, okay, these things if you say or you did, then it's definitely a like rejection.
well, I don't know about definitely a rejection, but there are some things that will make an application weaker. So I would say if you lack a specific itinerary or time frame, so you're very vague, and we can go into all of these in details. If you are vague in general about your ties in the United States or you're kind of halfway being truthful. I had an applicant where he was Pakistani, and the consular officer, this is the client, so he's coming to me after a refusal. The consular officer is like, "Who do you know in the United States?" And he's like, "Absolutely no one." And they're like, "Well, everybody in Pakistan knows somebody." It's like the same thing as a Punjabi applicant from India. It's like, "Who do you know in the U.S.?" And Punjabi applicant's like, "No one." It's like, "No, you're Punjabi. You have friends and family in the United States." Like consular officers in India and like Pakistan, they expect you to know someone. So you might as well tell them you know your colleague or your second cousin because that's what the consular officer wants to hear. If you know absolutely no one, definitely tell them that. But this particular individual actually knew a bunch of former classmates that were like in NYU and some top universities, that would have been an excellent answer to give. But instead, he said no one. And the consular officer pressed him, "Are you sure?" And he said yes. And he just froze up. And it looked like he was lying and it felt like he was lying. And the truthful answer of, "I have a couple of classmates that I know that are at NYU or this other university," would have been a lot better. So, lack of truthfulness, vagueness, especially about weird stuff that really won't make a difference, but in the mind of the applicant, maybe it makes a difference. Some cultural differences come into play for B1, B2s. For example, in India, you may be going for a housewarming party or like a baby shower, and it could be really significant for you, but for the consular officer, they don't really understand the significance. So just being aware of the cultural differences of the business of and the reason for travel. Also, with the whole cultural thing, the U.S. consular officer expects you to have a pretty planned out itinerary if you're making the investment. But I know that in Indian culture, you get the visa first and you make your itinerary later. Like that's not the expectation of the consular officer. So just kind of throwing out things like maybe I'll do this and maybe I'll do that, or maybe I'll figure it out when I get my visa. Just know that the consular officer is not going to like really look lightly upon that, even though like in your culture it's totally fine.
So should
Um,
on that point, should they like come and make up stuff that, oh yeah, probably go to like New York and things like that, or like, because again, if someone is coming for a month and they don't have their itinerary plan because their plan is going to be based on their kids availability, I'm assuming, again, my audience who's graduating, they might not have a full planned out trip, but they know that they will do some touristy things. So how do you like answer that question, that I'm going for kids graduation and that's it, or like, yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's like two flavors of that applicant. Like the one flavor is kind of the younger or family that's going mostly for a vacation and they don't really have the strong ties in the United States, or they're not saying that they have strong ties. Maybe they have a cousin, and that family in particular, or that couple or that individual is solely going for tourism. So they're coming to the consular window and saying, "I want to go on vacation," but they don't know what that vacation is. That's a lot different than
Mm.
mom and dad, brother, or family going to visit for their son's or daughter's graduation, because that itinerary is pretty clear. I'm going to Houston, Texas. That's what I'm
Mm.
doing. And then wherever my son takes me, that makes perfect sense. So there's two flavors of
Mm.
that and a different set of criteria by which the consular officer is going to judge your, how specific you are.
Got it. Okay. So I know I derailed you, but inability to describe the purpose, vagueness, cultural differences, anything else you feel like that can stand out as a common mistakes or red flags?
Yeah, like the unclear finances, like being unclear about how you're
Mm.
going to fund your travel, or being too humble about your finances, or not mentioning exactly how this is going to be paid for.
Being too humble sounds like Indians to me. So
Yeah, no, I know. And if you're Indian, I think this is like mainly a video for you, or in Asian countries.
yeah.
I know in other cultures they may, tell you they have all this. I would say that something odd is that you have, maybe $10,000 in savings, and then you come to the window and you're a family of four and you're saying you're going on vacation. Like your vacation will cost $10,000.
Yeah.
Right. And then you tell the consular officer asks you, "Well, how are you going to pay this for this?" And you're like, "I have $10,000 in savings." And the consular officer can see that maybe you make like 1,500, 1.5 lakhs or $1,500
Mm.
uh, or
A month.
$2,000 a
Yeah.
month. And maybe you have an entire real estate business. Maybe you have a huge portfolio. Maybe that's just one savings account. But if you come out the door and just say, "I have these $10,000. We're going to go on vacation," the consular officer is like, "What about your kids? Are they going to go to college? Like, how are you going to live after this vacation?" So you have to be clear, but that happens like quite often. It's just like your amount that you have is exactly how much this vacation is, and people don't seem to think it's important to kind of bridge the gap. And, consular officers are logical people. They want to know how you're going to afford this and why you're making this investment.
Yeah, yeah. I loved, again, I know this is probably, I'm derailing you, but this is similar to my brother's case, or like my family. We just got the visa last year. This year, a few months back. And you help them coach, you coach them for this, and they have approvals now. And it was fascinating to me how it started and how it ended, because in the beginning, you mentioned like my brother's case is like risky one, and it's difficult one. Like, why did you feel that way?
Yeah, so I got the honor to work with your family, which was awesome.
Yeah.
Um, brother, like we said, 27 years old, unmarried driver. It was like, all right, how can I get this person to get their visa? We had talked, and here are some strengths, right? So,
And I will also add, they're not coming for a specific purpose in a way. Like it is
Mhm.
just coming to meet me, who has a green card and has married to an American, and also like it's not like a graduation or anything like that. So there's not like they're just coming to hang out. So it's a lot. I mean, lot weaker purpose in a way, because if they were coming for my graduation, it would be different story than 10 years later they're coming when I've like already moved past all of that. Yeah, sorry, I'm just giving context. Yeah.
I appreciate that. I don't know if necessarily like graduation is stronger than a
Mm,
visit, and I don't want viewers to think that like you have to have like this specific purpose, concrete, set in stone purpose of travel. That's not what I'm saying. It needs to just make sense,
mm,
right? So, in very general terms, I don't know you like hopefully 100,000 viewers. Uh, I don't know every single circumstances. So, just keep an open mind as you
yeah.
listen to the story, okay, and how this is making sense. The consular officer wants this story to make sense. So Yudi's a green card holder. However, he came to the United States on an F1 visa, became an H1B, and had a high paying tech job at the time of this interview and married to an AMSIC. This is a positive thing, right?
Mm,
Like he's in the United States, he came here legally, he's doing all the right things, and he has the money to sponsor his family to come over and
mm,
visit him,
mm.
right?
Yeah.
So these are the positives that are at play. Their job at the visa window is to explain this. Generally speaking, older parents, especially after a certain age where the consular officer is not worried about them working illegally in the United States, have an easy or should be easy time getting a visa. And we have statistics to prove that older Indian applicants travel well. And so consular officers do tend to approve mom and dad.
Mm,
If they can just kind of be like, my son, here's his W 2, please let me go. So generally, mom and dad, especially after a certain age. Now, for you younger kids, where
mm,
your mom is dad are still working age,
mm,
the fear becomes if mom and dad are not making that much in their home country and not very established in their home country, are they going to use their visa well? So Yudi's parents are a little bit older.
mm.
Didn't
Yeah.
look like they were intending on hustling in the U.S.,
Yeah.
which is working out for this case scenario.
Yeah.
So okay, so each case is a little bit different.
Right.
Now, I think that your parents would have had a fairly easy time getting the visa on their own. Your brother tagged along to this interview.
Mm,
And the way that I assisted him was by helping him communicate a couple things. First of all, he does have a bachelor's degree. So he is a driver, but he has a bachelor's degree. And so I told him to communicate that at
yeah.
the visa window because that shows that, I'm educated. Second, he wasn't just a driver, he had a second car and he had contracts with companies that in those contracts, he established a relationship in which he was helping the company's employees go to work, and he was doing tours and travel and managing the other drivers of the car that he owned. So
Correct.
essentially, he had a tours and travel company as well as established contracts. And so we discussed that. We talked about going from I'm a driver to these ties that
Mm.
he had in India because he had these long established clients of his. And when, as a family, they went up to the visa window, they said, we're going to go visit, my brother and my
Sister-in-law. Yeah.
yeah, my brother, my sister-in-law, my child. And as a family, they communicated they were going to California. This is how much Yudi made. I am, the caretaker of my elderly parents, and I have a tours and travel company with established contracts.
Mm.
I'm a graduate. We're going to go for a couple of weeks, check out sites in California, and come back. And the consular officer asked him a couple of questions. How did Yudi go to the US? What his status is? It all checked out, and they ended up getting the visa.
Yep.
So that's what happened with your family.
Yeah. But yes, but I feel the coaching made the difference, because if you just look at the first mock interview, I don't know, I feel like it would be like, you tell me like what you would have assessed it based on the first answers, because again, I'm like, it might sound like I'm selling people to get one-on-one with you, but I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying I personally saw the difference of answers and how he was able to represent his situation better to show the ties, etc., than how he did it before that. Because yeah, like the first mock interview was horrible. so,
Yeah.
so
So like
yeah. Yeah.
there's a quote that's like been bouncing around in my head. It's like whether you believe you can or you
Mm,
can't, you're right.
yeah.
Right? Like Henry
Yep.
Ford said that.
Yeah.
And I knew this was your family and I was going to be so positive for them. Like I didn't care what the visa outcome was, even though part of me was like, this is going to be tough. So
Mm,
I went in there and I was like, no, you have a degree, you have another car, like you have these contracts, like let's reframe your story. And I think he went from being shy, not knowing what to expect, just being like, I'm just a driver, to like really being proud of the contracts that he established and the fact that he was managing other drivers and the fact that he had a degree and he was able to communicate and present that a lot more proudly. And I think that made a huge difference in his delivery. And ultimately, I think it made a huge difference in getting the visa.
yeah. All that to say, again, I'll be blunt. They should, if you are not confident about your case, they should do one-on-one with you and get help, because it's important. I'll put the link in the description so people can check out. What are the documents people should carry? And again, I think we cleared this myth that having prior green card or citizenship, is that bad? Is that good? In your case, like before we get to the documentation part.
It really depends
Hmm.
on, prior for that applicant, like if there's a green card pending,
Yeah.
it really depends. Like, for example, if there's a green card pending for elderly parents, it may not make a difference. But of course, if you have a green card in pending case in your file, it's going to be looked at and
So
asked
for
about. But
again
it's not.
example, if I did my brother's green card, which would take like 50 years, but assuming that happens, and um, he now goes for B1, B2, is that more riskier?
So if he has if he already has, see, this is how it gets complicated. If he already has a B1, B2 now. If he
Right.
travels well for the next 10 years, he has a green card application and he goes again, the consular officer is like, that's not a big deal. Now, if it was a fresh application and he has the same exact profile that we discussed, I feel like for him, he couldn't afford another thing
Mm,
against him
yeah,
because he
yeah,
already, in my opinion, had like weak ties because he's
yeah, yeah.
unmarried and stuff like that. Now, I'll use my family example,
Mm,
okay? So
mm,
I'm married to an Indian and he's a US citizen now, but his sister, she's a former H-1B. Her and her family live in Bangalore and they have professional jobs. I feel like if we applied for a green card for them and they wanted to come visit us because his sister was a former H1B, they're really established in Bangalore, they could just say, we applied for these green cards knowing that I will never get my green card, but maybe my daughter will, who's like 4 years old
mm,
at the age of 24. And so we applied for these green cards, but we're just going to go for a visit. I don't feel like that green card application will really have an impact. So it depends, right? So it
mm.
really, really depends.
Got it.
Yeah.
And what about if you have because this is another question, do you have any relatives or people who you know? Um, one, should they say yes or should they say no? And two, if it is a relative who is on F1 or H1B or green card, like how does this all affect?
Yeah, so it just really depends on a case by case basis. I would say like the more professional, like if you have relatives that are H1Bs, that's generally fine. Um, it really depends on a case by case basis. I mean, can't go into all the scenarios, but I would say, oh, always be truthful, because the consular officer may see something in your record, especially if you've applied before about a family member that you have, if you've told them that in the past, especially. So if you have any denials, that denial is always going to be in your record. So
Mm.
just be weary about trying to hide family members that are in the United States, especially if you're going to visit them. So it gets a little muddy and gets a little
Yeah,
tricky.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. What about documents? What documents should one carry? Is the invitation letter important? Bank statement of the people who sponsoring them, or they are if they are like what? Yeah, what should we carry?
I think the other reason why your brother and family were comfortable is because I think we went through all this and they kind of knew what to expect. So they were a lot more comfortable going into it. And for your parents' example, a copy of your green card, your tax statement, for example. So if the person in the United States is sponsoring you, having that information, an employment letter, if possible, from the person that is working in the United States. So usually documents are not really looked at because they're easy to forge. But those are some of the things. Obviously, you want to have the barcode page of your DS-160. We didn't talk about B1, B2 travel. We didn't talk about B1 travel, but for business travelers, having a solid itinerary and the invitation letters from both the entity in the United States and back in your home country, or a copy of the conference name, those documents sometimes are looked at. So, depending on your purpose of travel, but you don't need to have hotel reservations, you don't need to have airline reservations. Those
Hmm.
kind of things, you should wait until you get your visa before you do any of that. And the consular officer is definitely not expecting you to have copies of that as documents.
Sorry, I was gonna ask for the parents who are self-sponsoring, like their kids are just graduating and they're going for graduation ceremony, so the kids are not sponsoring. In my case, obviously, I was sponsoring, but what if the parents are saying that they are funding their own trip? What do they show, like, or not show, but like, how do they explain their financial situation?
Yeah, so documents are generally not going to be looked at. So if you guys want to bring all the bank statements and that you want, but it's generally not going to be looked at, they're just going to have to say, I'm sponsoring my own. I have a pension, or I work. I'm a government employee. I make X amount. I have X amount of immovable assets. I can more than support my own travel. Just be very clear about how.
Hmm. Okay. For B1 people, let's say, like, so again, I'm gonna use my example. If I have a social media team in India and I'm organizing a big conference and I need help from my social media team and they're coming for this conference, like, can they come on B1 visa because of this reason?
So they're like working.
They are my contractors, yeah, let's assume they are They are freelancer. Yes. Oh, yes. They are. You're right. They are correct. Yeah. They would be attending this. It's not my conference, but I want them to attend this conference because it's going to help them upskill themselves.
Okay, that's different than like helping you like set up a booth.
Got it. Got it. Yes. Makes sense. Yeah. So if they are working, then it's not good.
You cannot work or do any sort of productive work on a B1, B2. So, say you have a high level job, you can do meetings, you can do trainings, but you can't do the job that you would do in India in the United States.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense. But NAFSA, for example, it's very important. I want them to attend these conference with me. Is that
Yeah, so they need to be able to explain why it's important to attend the conference, how this conference is going to be paid for, because their salary might not be that high in India. So if you're paying for it, they should have sponsorship letters saying that you're going to front and pay for this conference and why it's important for this individual to go. You know, they shouldn't be like low level social media managers. Like they're going to a NAFSA conference, for example, that's an education conference. Why is a social media person going to a NAFSA conference? Like, so it's not just about can they go? It's like, why do they need to go? It needs to make sense. Like if it was a social media conference and they were a social media high level manager, or your CEO, COO going to a specific conference, like the connection needs to be made and they need to be able to explain it at the window. And I think that's where a lot of conference goers or people going for meetings kind of flounder, is they kind of miss some of these points.
clothing wise? Is there like anything that one should wear, one should not wear?
You know, wear something that makes you comfortable, nothing overly blingy. Don't try too hard. If you know, normally don't wear a suit, like, you know, don't wear a suit at the visa interview. You know, what you're wearing looks pretty comfy and professional. You know, if you're going for a B1, B2 interview, nobody's expecting you to be dressed nicely, but you know, nothing too flashy, and then don't look, you know, too grungy either. Just look presentable.
Hmm. Another thing that I've noticed, again, this is probably Indian culture, where we um, overdo like sir and ma'am to visa officers. Is that like looked? How does visa officer, like, do they like it? Do they not like it? How would
You
you advise people?
Right. So you just want to be on the same playing field as
Mm,
the consular officer, right? If you want to look like a professional, like your brother's a, you know, a driver, but he has his own little company, he's going to be on a better playing field if he's confident rather than subservient or saying like sir, you know, at the visa window, or ma'am. So it's
mm,
just kind of being aware of your body language and overall demeanor. You don't need to say sir or ma'am.
okay. Denials. If someone has gotten their B1, B2 denial for whatsoever, they did not watch our video, they did not consult you, and they got denial. How can they overcome that?
So if your purpose of travel has passed, like make sure that you have another reason for applying for a B1, B2, assess the reasons for why you were denied the first time around. You know, did you not explain your finances well enough? Did you not explain your purpose of travel well enough? So really being honest with yourself about that reason. And yeah, so denials are tough, you know, that those notes are permanently going to be in your record. So, you know, it's those denials are not to be taken lightly. So if
What
you're
about
not,
prior F1 denial, H1B denial? Can that affect B1, B2?
yeah, it could. All denials are in your record. So if you have a prior F1 denial and now you're going for a B1, B2 visa, the picture at the visa window is getting a little bit more complex. So making sure that you're really prepared the next time you go into that visa interview with more insight into why you got that denial and
Hmm.
how next time is going to go. Does that make sense?
It does, yes. We're gonna wrap the video, but before we do, any final tips, wisdom for aspiring B1, B2 visa holders?
Just being prepared, you know, being prepared, knowing that the visa interview is really short, so being concise, knowing why you're going to the United States, giving specific answers, making sure that your profile, the reason you're going, all lines up, being prepared to talk about your ties in your home country, not downplaying what you do, making sure that you're aware of cultural nuances, even things like your job title. If you have something in your job title that sounds like specialist, but really you're managing like 50 people. Like maybe it's better if you say that you're a manager, or being, not allowing for space or misunderstanding at that visa interview. So really being aware of all of those different things, dressing neat. I think that's about
Yeah, and
everything that we can cover.
yeah, and if people have more questions, they should put a comment and we'll do another video on this topic. I did not ask this, but I was thinking of my friends because they mentioned it to me that they want to do road trip in United States. So this would be a complete tourist leisure trip. How much planning do they need to have before visa enter? Do they need to have like, we're going to rent this car from here, we're going to start from LA, Route 66 to New York, these are the stops, these are the hotels, everything planned, vaguely planned, what, like how much of direction they need to have?
Yeah, so I would just say, so a little bit of context, like I recently graduated, or we all just finished our master's program, or we all just been working for a couple years. We're now self-sufficient. So a group of 4 of us, we decided we want to go to the United States and do a road trip from Washington to San Diego, maybe see the redwoods, maybe head up Santa Monica on the way. We definitely want to check out Seattle. It's going to be around 11 days for the road trip. I have a cousin in San Diego I want to say hello to. They're, an IT person. Yeah, like something like that. It just kind of is comprehensive, like where I am, where I'm going. So it's not like every specific stop, but it's like a general idea. And it's specific enough that you don't fall in the bucket of the overgeneralized, I want to go to Niagara Falls in Orlando. Like you do have like some sort of plan.
Yeah. And this person, like he is one of my close friend. He has everything planned because he's been thinking about this trip for a long time. So he knows that he's gonna start from LA to New York, and he's gonna do this 15-day drive, and with 3 other friends of theirs. So it's okay to say that he has been planning this trip for like a couple years, and he's been saving for this, and blah blah blah.
Yeah, I don't know, a couple of years. You can say I've been saving for a while.
Yeah.
Um, this has been our plan, for a while, and
Yeah.
yeah, and especially if say if he's done other road trips before in other countries or has other travel, he could like, I've traveled Europe, I've done it. I really want to do like LA to New York now. Yeah, just kind of like candid and chill, and I think that would work for him.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. I'm excited. We're going to end this video. We'll do next ones on H1B and L12s. If you have any question on that topic, please let us know. But again, until our next one, let's see if you
Keep
remember.
smiling, keep hustling, right?
Nice. Yes, that is awesome.